Hey there, everybody. Ooh, this is still quite loud. Let me see. It's a little bit better. Well, how's everybody doing? So, as you guys know, this is you've been following along. This is our basically our third episode of the solo RPG D&D 5e stream. In the first one, we kind of put together the world, or a little sandbox to kind of start off adventuring. In the second, we made our character and gave him a sidekick. We'll kind of go over that real quick before we jump right back in, so anybody who's new can kind of figure out where we're starting from. And in this one, we're gonna finally get Leah and Ott, and they're finally gonna show up at Split Valley Oasis, and that's our plan sort of for today, as they try to figure out the mystery behind the research documents and the apparent suicide of a librarian. So that's going to be very interesting. But how are you guys doing? How's everything going for you? Still a little bit behind on my prep. I haven't even grabbed my dice out yet. I am going to use physical dice for this session instead of the roller on screen. And that's simply because I got a bunch of other stuff that I'm looking at. We're going to be looking at, and I don't want to clutter it up with another screen just for dice rolling. As I get things probably consolidated down in the future, I may go back to using the virtual dice roller just because I think it's more fun for you guys to see the results as I see them rather than me telling you every result. But until we do that, I'm going to use the physical dice in my handy dandy little dice roller here. Get some of those out. So we are starting with a 0 level 5e character. So we can't look at anything that's going to be too threatening as far as combat's concerned right out the gate, because Leah does not have a ton of hit points. Especially not right now. I mean, she'll never have a ton of hit points, but if things go as planned, once she grabs those class levels, she's still not going to have a lot of hit points, because it's likely that she's going to end up as a wizard or an artificer, depending on how the story goes. I'm leaning more towards wizard just with her background and everything, but I'm not sure yet. I'm still open to maybe it being something else. But at least for right now, she's just a little bit better than average commoner. So she's got stats, right? She has stats. So she's already above most commoners with 10s and everything. But she's far from being a superpowered class character. Alright, we got our 10s. Got some 4s. Got an 8. Let me get another 8 out of here. I'll pull out a D12 if I thought we needed it, but well, actually, we might need a D12 now that I think about it. Not for anything related to the character itself, which, D12s are basically the bastard children of D&D dice. Almost nobody uses them. Almost no class or spells or anything uses them. A few weapons and barbarian hit dice. That's about it. And that's a problem that kind of happens throughout most of the editions of D&D. Certainly the contemporary Wizards of the Coast editions. D12's just not used a lot. Alright, I think that got my dice, got some coffee, I've got my my resources. Some of them are digital, some of them are physical for the moment. Like I said, I kind of did a mixture because I didn't want to clutter up too many things, because I'm kind of going to be kind of jumping between a few different screens. So I didn't want to make it too confusing and spend a whole bunch of time shuffling through those things. So I've got some of my resources are going to be at least analog for the moment. May change that later, depending on how things go. Let me adjust my light real quick. There we go. I think that's about it. Of course, if you guys have any questions about anything, you can drop them in chat, and I'll answer them as they come up. If you want to know more just about me if this is your first time kind of showing up at the stream, thanks. Yeah, thanks for showing up and trying to get some membership going. So if you guys are looking for for somebody to follow and you like what I'm doing, go ahead and do that. You can see sort of down at the bottom here, I have Twitter, which is the best place to get a hold of me. I also have a website, redraggedfiend.com, which has a whole bunch of blogs I've been doing for a little over a decade, playing D&D in different iterations and talking about tabletop stuff. So if you are a dungeon master who's looking for tips and hints or extra things or different new things to try, it's a great resource. Or if you're just thinking about playing D&D, especially if you're looking to be a dungeon master, and it seems really overwhelming, that could be a really, really good resource for you. There's a ton of articles in there that I think help kind of break down and demystify sort of the experience. There's also one that I did a few months ago about specifically using 5e to run a solo RPG. So if you kind of want to do this, we have resources for that as well, which will be really useful. Let's see, anything else to mention? I think that's it. So we did make a few changes, I think, from the last time that we streamed that I can kind of show you guys, especially if you haven't caught up with it. I think the first thing is let's take a look at the map and see some of the adjustments I did there. So let's hop over to that. There we go. All right, so as you can see, we kind of have our big hex in the middle here. And that big hex, so these hexes on the left side are iterative. They are toponymic, which means that like one hex, and then hexes go into that hex, and hexes go into that hex, and hexes go into that hex. So we have all the way at the top here, we have our Atlas hex, which we have it sort of broken down. You can see here I added a little label so we can kind of tell the latitude, because we don't know the longitude. We don't know exactly where we are in the world, because we're kind of building it as we adventure. Except for this first little sandbox, just so we know. So we're starting off right here in sort of the central hex. And that's at between 7 and 12 degrees north latitude, which if you're looking for what that is, it's 360 nautical miles, which is like 415 miles or statute miles, normal miles. So that one hex is an extremely large space, and that's how many miles it is across. That's not the area of it, so it's an extremely large place. And then that goes down into our region hex. So all of these hexes right here fall into this one hex. And each of these are about 60 nautical miles across, so it's somewhere around 65 miles, I think, statute miles. And it represents about a week of travel. And then those kind of bump down here to the county-sized hexes, which each of these hexes represents about a day of travel. And so we have the central one, so you can see the central one's blue because that's water, and that's where our oasis is. And this is the representation, dialing down and zooming in just a little bit more, we can see. And there's the trading post that we are trying to get to. So we're going to kind of start from off screen outside of this hex and move into it to get to this trading post. And we're not going to do the hex procedures specifically for that. I just kind of want to jump into the story a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. But we're going to be coming from outside this hex into it because we determined while we were making the character that they were not from this area. So they're just now arriving here for the first time in search of somebody that they know or at least last heard was here at the Split Valley Oasis trading post. But those are sort of the changes we have to the map that'll help us along the way. And so in addition to that, I also want to talk about, we had the character and I went ahead and made up their backstory, which I have placed somewhere. Here it is. Okay. So I'll bring this on the screen so you guys can see it. Just pull this over here to the right. And then... So this is sort of, I took the elements that we had in background, which we used the Xanthar's Guide to Everything, plus some questions that I use personally to sort of develop the character, because it's very important, especially when you're rolling a solo RPG character, that they're kind of a hot mess. They got to have a lot of people. They've got to have a lot of stuff going on in their lives because they're going to be the center and they're going to be the impetus for everything you do. So they've got to have sort of webs that kind of stick out into the world and attach to other things in the world to, get them to adventure, to keep going. So this is sort of, I took that and then I made the narrative basically of what that background looks like. So I figure we could start off. I'll just read it out loud. It's a little long because we had a bunch of things. We ended up, because our main character is an elf. She had quite a few life events using the Xanathar's Guide. This is your life section. She had quite a few life events before we get to her actually starting to be an adventurer, or actually returning to being an adventurer, because that's also in the backstory. So I'll just go ahead and read that off real quick, and then we'll have it. So our main character's name is Leah, and actually, to go with that, I'll actually just bring her up next. There we go. So you guys can kind of see where she's at. All right. Leah was born and raised in the remote village of Thulis Hills, where her father served as a reeve. Sovlis, her father, was a kind father, but provincial life was clearly a step down for the official. He was well educated, and the one solace and spark of enjoyment he found in the remote area was to share his education and worldly knowledge with his daughter. It offered Leah an education standard far and above the education level of her village peers. But it couldn't last forever. As Leah grew and her zeal for learning bypassed her father's capabilities, he became restless, not having anything to do. As Leah entered her teenage years, her father left to sate his wanderlust, but the Sovlis-shaped hole in their family's lives didn't last too long. We have Carrick Cardonal, a local merchant, married Therostra, which is Leah's mother, to become Leah's stepfather. Despite the hurt and guilt that comes with being abandoned by her father, Leah retained much of his curiosity and eagerness to grow her mind. And even in the far corners of the realm, merchants make good money. Carrick and Therostra afforded Leah a proper education in the city, boarding her at Riverside Conservatory. So she basically moved out of her home village as a teenager so she could pursue a higher education and the opportunities that come with that. It felt like for the first month, Leah cried herself to sleep, racked with a severe case of homesickness and intimidation from city life. Right, she grew up in a very remote village, so she wasn't used to sort of the hustle and bustle of city, and things are very differently. Living in a place where you don't know everybody is kind of weird for the first time. She was disciplined severely for absconding in the night 3 times in her first year, where she would basically try to run away home because she was not having a good time at the conservatory. Her stepfather and mother came to visit later and brought a present with them, a teapot with a minor enchantment, because we rolled up that as one of the trinkets for Leah. She has this magical teapot, and we can look at it right here on the character sheet, that is always full and hot. So that is a gift from her parents. With a simple word, it heats and fills with the flavor of Therostra's favorite herbal tea, so it's got that very much that sort of smell and cozy feeling of home to kind of help her relax and still feel connected to her family when she's living in a very different place. All right, the gift helped to bring Leah comfort in her bouts of homesickness. Soon the homesick feeling became a distant memory as Leah dived into her studies, earning high marks and recognition among faculty and her peers. Because if we look over here, Leah's got an intelligence of 16. Like, she's a smart cookie, right? She knows what she's doing. She has the ability, academically, to learn very well. So Riverside Conservatory became a second home, and she liked it well enough to stay past graduation and sort of become a professional academic. While in residence at Riverside Conservatory, she kept an on-again, off-again dalliance with Camille Muse, a tiefling poet, and she worked for the conservatory for more than a decade until the falling out ended her tenure. So things are going pretty well for Leah in the beginning of her life, right? I mean, she has the homesickness, but she's afforded this wonderful opportunity, and she's a good enough student that she kind of gets the ability to be a professional student in that way, kind of be a professional researcher, which is sort of, I feel like for somebody like Leah, that's almost a dream come true, right? That you get to turn your passion into your career and get paid to do it. An expert in primordial and elemental research, Leah joined a research team focused on researching a controversial and taboo topic, the primordial origins of dragons. The team's official report with their findings was deemed invalid and a stain on the name of the conservatory. The capstone of their research included an observation of a colorless dragon cryptid, speculated as the missing link between primordials and dragons. The group's findings were laughed at as egregious lies and treated as pure fantasy. So, things did not go well with their findings, and, most people clearly thought they made it up, right? It's like saying that you have footage of Bigfoot, right? It's weird, and people are like, no, I don't think you do. Especially in this sort of quasi-medieval fantasy era where you don't have sort of like video documentation or anything like that, where basically you just say, I saw a thing. And then, the growing academic public is like, no, I don't think you saw that thing. And you have no proof that you saw that thing. Riverside Conservatory, attempting to salvage their reputation, officially released all the team members involved. Well ridiculed in academic society, the group were laughed out of the city, and they sort of drifted apart to the far corners of the land as they sort of tried to pick up the pieces and find their new paths. Despite the work's reception at Riverside, a sympathetic librarian kept a record of their findings buried in the conservatory's official references. Right, it's official research. This librarian is a stickler for, if there's a formal research project and it comes to a conclusion, even if those notes are necessarily incorrect or those findings are overturned later, it's important for documentation reasons to keep that information on reference if for whatever reason you ever need to go back to it, or maybe the things that turn over those findings are found out to be false later, then you can go back to them. So from a librarian's standpoint, documentation is very important. As for Leah, she returned to her childhood home. Her anger and shame melted away quickly. She spent the energy caring for her mother, who had grown ill, which is one of the things that we rolled up in the Xanathar's Guide, This Is Your Life, is that her mother is not having a great time. She's sick with something. And we think that this is kind of put it together that this has become sort of a chronic illness. This is an ongoing thing that she has. And, while she's taking care of her mother, she's planning her next steps. What's she going to do now, right? She's kind of only known this academic life and studying, and now, right, she has basically been disgraced as an academic because nobody believed their findings. And she's kind of awash, right, trying to figure out what she's going to do. With a specific set of skills, she found work supporting a group of adventurers. Unfortunately, that ended abruptly when a number of the adventurers were killed by an arcane trap Leah was not able to fully parse. So she's sort of hired on as a hireling, as sort of a sidekick for another adventuring party out in the world, because she has sort of this knowledge specifically of elementals and primordials and arcana and history. Like, she has that sort of background element to her that can serve to kind of help dungeon delvers parse magical traps, arcane tomes, identify things, right? Those sorts of things. Inbar, a survivor of that group, had grown a friendship with Leah, but that, blamed obviously Leah for the death of their friends, basically, at this point. The tempers flared, with the bellows of grief, and Leah left what remained of the group, swearing off adventuring totally. Like, they had sort of a confrontation, and Leah did what Leah does, and she walked away from it, basically. So, with two enterprises failed, Leah was again alone and sort of aimless about what to do. But the lull in her life didn't last very long. Soon after, sort of falling out of adventuring, war broke out in the marches surrounding Thula's Hills, her hometown. She, like many, were conscripted into service, and not having the ability to buy out your service, right? Basically, pay your liege lord in coin rather than service. So she kind of got conscripted and pressed into service, in military service. With her quick mind, she found the spot serving as the quartermaster's assistant, where she coordinated logistics for the army's baggage train and supply lines. Not long into the campaign, her service ended abruptly when the baggage train was ambushed en route by enemy riders. One rider's blade left Leah's face with a gruesome memento of the day. And I don't need the rest of that sentence. Oops. Hopefully I'll go back in and edit this and clean it up a little bit. So she has this, and that was one of the things that we found out during character creation, is that she got some sort of war wound from her experience. So she has a pretty nasty scar on her face because of it. Once free from her bed, recovering from injuries, Leah began to look anew for employment. During her search, Leah received a letter from Harol Smudges, one of Riverside Conservatory's library aides, the same grumpy halfling that had saved their team's research from destruction. So that was the one who sort of hid it in the conservatory records. In the letter, he posed a new question about the group's discredited research. So that's one of the things. So we took the sage background for Leah, and one of the things that comes up in the sage background is that you have basically an unanswered letter from a colleague. So that is that item that we have from Harol. So she receives this letter, and she's like, I'm going to go to the conservatory. But of course, she's denied entry because of who she is. Because, the conservatory still wants nothing to do with Leah and her fellows and her peers. So she's sort of denied entrance. She did, however, kind of learn at the beginning when she asked to, see Harol and talk about the letter. She learns that Harol has apparently taken his own life. And that sort of sticks with her, that idea. The idea that, okay, so Harol wrote me a letter and I received it, and then I basically packed up and went back to the conservatory to, talk to him and look at the records and see if you can answer that question or, figure out what's what. But in that short sort of time frame, Harol has committed suicide. And this feels very strange to Leah. She has difficulty parsing why somebody would ask you a question in a letter, and then before it was even possible to get an answer to that question, would end their own life voluntarily. Those pieces don't fit together for Leah. That doesn't make sense. So with that in mind, Leah decides to continue her travels and sets a course for Split Valley Oasis. Trading Post is the last known location of one of her former research team peers. So she doesn't know if that person's still there, but she does know that's the last time she heard about any of her peers being anywhere. And I expect that she got this information from her father as a merchant who kind of has connections all over the place, and he probably came home one day after a trip and was like, oh, I heard about one of your former peers, whoever it is, and they were out here at this trading post. So that's where she's kind of going. So she wants to get some more insight on the situation and talk to this other researcher about whatever the issue is that Harol has brought up. So to do that, she kind of spends what remaining sort of coin that she has on supplies for the journey and hiring Ott, a veteran guide and former hunter that Leah knew from her adventuring days. So another sort of like hireling that she had known, and a more experienced hireling. The way this is set up is that Leah was not adventuring very long, but in that time she kind of grew a little bit of a network, right? She kind of knows some people that are in the business of adventuring, or knows people who know people, and Ott is one of those people. So we did talk about Ott last time, but that does sort of explain why Leah doesn't have that much money, right? She has 9 gold coins, which is good for a commoner, but it's not good if you're trying to plan an adventure, right? If you're doing a bunch of traveling and you're not holding down the job, it's not a ton of money. That's not going to keep you, even at 1 gold a day, as sort of a a commoner style of living, right? It's only a little bit over a week, right? A week and a half almost. But let's look at Ott. So we found out during our character creation that Ott is a Knoll. So she is based off of a. I'll go ahead and add that because it's going to be kind of important in case I need to look up her stat block again. She's a Knoll hunter. So we're using that stat block, and we're using the Tasha's sidekick rules to sort of put that template on top of the stat block. So as you can tell, sort of in between these two, right, there's Leah, and there's Ott. So Ott is definitely a more veteran adventurer, right? She has more hit points. She has certainly better offensive capability. She's got better defensive capabilities. And she's got skills that make sense for somebody who's sort of like a veteran guide in the wilderness would have, right? They have perception. She has sleight of hand, stealth, survival, athletics, animal handling, acrobatics. Because one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that Leo met up, at least in the beginning, with a sidekick that was going to complement her strengths and weaknesses. Because Ott, not particularly smart, not charismatic, because she is a giant Knoll, and people probably don't like that. But it definitely offsets Leah's definitely not adventuring offensive defensive combat capabilities right now, and it allows Leah to still sort of shine when it comes to intelligence and those skills that surround that, where she is strong, right? Because Ott is a very good, is a very strong character for a sidekick, but she's not very good against to dealing with anything that's magical or puzzles or intelligence based, right? That's definitely a big weakness on her, and that's sort of the spots, at least for right now, that Leah can kind of step forward when she can use sort of her. I mean, Leah doesn't have great charisma either, but she can use her charisma and her intelligence and let Ott kind of handle more of the rugged kind of work, at least for right now. That's why she's hired her, right? She like Leah understands her capabilities. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is that I did kind of draft up a physical description for Leah, which we can I'll bring it up here since I'm kind of hiding it. Come here. Down here at the bottom, so you guys can see that. So Leah Amakir. Leah is a lithe high elf with skin reminiscent of cured leather volumes that she spends a lot of time reading. She has mid-back length hair, the color of night, though it's usually done up or covered in a scarf to kind of keep it protected or out of the way. Her eyes are deep brown wells, and she has a very aquiline nose, and she has lips. She has a very sort of. She's a smart, well-to-do, put-together woman. So she's got a very sort of stately visage, right? Like she's a sort of she looks very I don't want to say bossy, but she looks like a woman who knows what she's doing, right? She looks very confident. But that is sort of undone somewhat by her life experience, especially that her scar. So she has a sort of quiet and impassive sort of nature to her, coming with sort of an academic and confident woman who's not sort of like spending a lot of her time trying to impress other people, especially with sort of her look. She does that more with sort of her mind, right? But she has this sort of grisly scar. So she's often seen as sort of like standoffish, or she was seen as standoffish because of sort of her personality and her sort of stately, put together, kind of almost straight laced kind of look to her. But now she's got this very ugly scar that kind of like comes down and over her mouth and across her chin from from the attack on the baggage train. And so that's sort of when people see her now, when she's quiet and impassive, rather than just kind of coming as sort of standoffish, she's now almost read as intimidating. Right now, you see this person's got this real tough looking scar, and they are not smiling, and they're just sort of staring daggers into you when you have their attention. And right, that's read more as intimidating rather than annoyed or standoffish or anything like that. But that's sort of an idea of what Leah kind of looks like. As for Ott, what Ott looks like, well, Ott is a gnoll, and she's a female gnoll, which gnolls are like many animals in our world, in that the female of the species is typically significantly larger than the male. So Ott's about 7 foot tall, and she's a big lady. She's a big gnoll lady, and she looks it. I think the big thing that kind of stands out with Ott, because she's dressed in like leathers and she has weapons on her. She looks very outdoorsy. She's got a very almost sort of like rangery vibe to her. But the thing that sort of stands out in their decorations, she has these, and I've got it down here. Let's highlight that. She has these sort of deep grayish black shale bangles that she wears around her wrists. They're adorned with these white enamel hatch decorations on them, so they're kind of notable in that way. But yeah, that's sort of the background, and that's everything that we're doing as far as that. Yeah, go ahead and say that. So now we can kind of jump into it. Unless you guys have any questions, let me organize my stuff. If you have any questions or comments, anything good like that, stuff that you want to see, any problems or anything like that, throw it in the chat. I'm gonna take a look and get my papers arranged real quick, and then we'll jump into the adventure itself. Okay, I think we're good. Perfect. So let's jump in. Get those guys. Did that. So I did. Usually I don't do this when I'm running things solo, but I did in fact kind of figure out what this first day was going to kind of be, because I didn't want to spend too much time in this first session kind of fumbling around and flipping through a whole bunch of charts and stuff. So I did a little bit of that beforehand, so that way we can just kind of jump right into the adventuring. So we open up on Leah waking up in the morning. It's still pretty cool. It's probably in the 40s, because it's spring maiden 53 in the world's calendar, but that's approximately March 12th. The weather is relatively nice, but it's still kind of cool in the morning, and it's definitely in the springtime, so it's gonna lead to a relatively pleasant day, which is good because Ott and Leah are still on the road to get to Split Valley Oasis. They're relatively close. They're definitely gonna reach there in the morning. So we sort of open up with Ott sort of waking Leah up as she's sort of like rekindling the embers of the fire as they sort of put together a meager sort of travel rations breakfast. And Ott sort of like goes about her business, preparing her gear and getting things ready for the day as they begin to move and sort of busting down camp. And as they're doing that, and they start off and they get everything packed up and they get onto the trail, like they can hear from where they are now the distant sort of thunder that's happening, the echoes of thunder in the distance. Now, the two of them don't know what that means yet. The rest of us who, if you were watching, especially that first world building stream, you guys already know exactly what this thunder is. But the two of them are kind of share a look because, as far as they can see, the skies are pretty clear as they're sort of exiting this lightly wooded area where they've set up camp, and that all they're seeing is relatively blue skies. So it's kind of weird to hear thunder because usually that would be something that's associated with like heat thunder, but it's definitely not that hot yet. That is something that might happen specifically during the summer. It's sort of the environment they're in, but it's very strange to hear that in the spring. So I think they both kind of shrug it off to begin with, and kind of head along their way. And let's find out which one of them is going to come across our first sort of point of interest. Yeah, perfect. So they're traveling along, and they don't really have a path or anything. Well, actually, they do. They do have a path that they're following to the trading post. And as they're following it, they have sort of this highlands, these hills that sort of come up on the side that they're kind of walking into. Because remember, they're basically entering a valley. So they have mountains that are and foothills that are sort of on one side of them, and the other side's relatively open and flat. It's a very plains area, and then we're approaching on the free side, on the open side. There is sort of a small cluster of like highlands that kind of build up, of mountains that build up and sort of create this valley that they're trying to enter into. And as they do that, Leah is they're walking, relative silence. They've been going for a few days now, at least, and they've been walking. So they know each other, but they don't know each other like super well. So they're not like friends. This is definitely still an employee kind of situation that they have. But as they're traveling, Leah kind of looks up into the rugged hills, sort of off to her side, and she just makes out a solitary sort of shack, and it looks pretty dilapidated. Like, it doesn't look like necessarily that it's put together super well. Not sure if it's abandoned or if it's just worn by the weather and somebody hasn't taken care of it. So Leah sort of points out and is like, should we investigate that? And Ott kind of follows her line of sight and looks up at it. We could, but it might delay our arrival. So Leah kind of considers it. They don't really have a particular reason to do that. But let me make a roll real quick, and I'm going to see if we know they have plenty of food. I want to see if maybe they need some water because we're going through a pretty arid area, so they may not have. And there's an oasis they're coming up to, so let's see if they have water. If they don't have water, they might want to stop by and see if they can, if there's a well or something that they may be able to get some water from. Okay, perfect. So Leah sort of grabs her water skin and sort of shakes it, and it's probably only got about a quarter of it left. And they do know that they're maybe a few hours from the oasis. And so she kind of asks, "Do we have enough water? Do we need water?" And Not takes a look at sort of her water skin, sort of grumbles in a very sort of hyena, sort of growly kind of way under her breath. Well, let's look. So the two decide to go take a look at this shack. Now, we don't know if it's abandoned, so this is the first time that we're going to kind of do one of our 1d20 oracle rolls. So there's a lot of oracle systems out there. I use a 1d20 very simplified one, but there's a lot. GM Emulator is probably the most common one, so if you're interested in looking up some of that, you can find that online very easily. There's many, but they all do relatively the same thing, which is allow you to ask questions and then get answers back by using dice. So I use a really simplified 1d21 just to keep things fast and loose, and because I'm using a d20 based system, that works better than maybe using a d100 roll when I'm not using a d100 system, right? So kind of just making sure that I keep using the same dice, which I think makes things really fast. And so basically the way that the process works is that anything that's 13 and above is a success. Anything that's 8 or below is a failure. Anything that's in that 9 to 12 range is basically whatever is going to be most beneficial to the PCs. But we also have a but section. So it's going to be something that's useful for the PCs, but there's some sort of complication or some sort of unknown factor that kind of shifts what that is. So if we want a yes, it's yes, but something. And I have a table that we roll on for that. So right now we want to know, as they're sort of approaching, I guess my first question is, would Ott be stealthing up? And I think she would. This is a veteran guide, a veteran sort of adventurer. They don't know what they're going to find up at this abandoned cabin. It could be a crazy person that tries to attack them. So I think until they know what it is, they're definitely stealthing up. But what I really want to know is that as they sort of reach the edge of the clearing where this abandoned hut is, where this abandoned shack is, I want to know, is it abandoned? So we're going to do the 1d20 roll for that. And I don't think that we're going to have a modifier for this one, so it's just going to be a flat roll. And I rolled a 7, so no, it is not abandoned. So there is definitely one or more things here, because we don't know yet. So I guess probably our next question is, all right, let's find out who's there, right? So we know that there are creatures there, but we don't know what type of creatures. Now we are sort of in the wilds, so I have a sort of separate table that I roll on for that to see, what type of creature it's going to be. All right. So I rolled a 4, which means that it is on a d6, which means that it is a natural beast of some kind, and then I have another d20 roll under that kind of gives me the subtype. All right, that's a 9. So let me hop over this real quick and let's look. So that would make it 9 is the third. So it's not a beast. It's not a dragon. But it is an elemental. So an elemental of some type. I think. Because we have... Basically, we're going to set our party size at first level, because we only have kind of one first level character, and that's Ott. Because Leah is definitely a 0 level character. So there is some sort of elemental that is doing something to the shack. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna make we're gonna make this an easy encounter based off of what I rolled, and then I'm just gonna sort of generate a random encounter to see what these things are. All right, so we have some mud methods. So that's sort of, as they're sort of approaching up here, we see that there's actually quite a bit of activity that's going around the hut. And I have a little table. This is sort of my DM's binder, but it also has a lot of useful stuff for solo RPGs. And one of those things that I have in here is a table that is monster preoccupations, which is basically you run into some monsters. What the heck are they doing? Because I don't want my RPGs, whether I'm running for other people or running by myself, to make it feel like the monsters are just like a video game, just standing around waiting for player characters to do stuff. So they're definitely doing something. All right, that's a 1d10 table. And I rolled a 1. These mud methods are currently embroiled in some sort of argument. I think they're in a fight. There's 8 of them, and they're fighting over something. So they're fighting over some sort of resource or something they found within the shack. Now, right, our two characters are basically sort of laying down, hidden at sort of the edge of the clearing, kind of like peeking over the rocks, kind of like watching these tiny creatures fight with each other. And I think Ott was very much has that adventurer mindset and be like, oh yeah, we can methods, yeah, we'll just clear these out real quick. Maybe we'll get a reward from whoever owns this place. And I think Leah, right, this is Leah's specialty, by the way, right? Remember, her research is specifically in elementals and primordials. So I'm going to let her roll an Arcana check. So let's bring up Leah real quick. I'm going to give her, because she has years of training in specifically this, so I'm going to give her advantage with her Arcana roll, which she already gets a +5 to. Yeah, so she rolled an 18, which I think is going to pass most average DCs. So I think that makes sense. So she knows a little bit about mud methods. Now, I don't off the top of my head, so let's look up mud methods real quick. And the monster manual. Okay, perfect. 216. Perfect. All right. So they're definitely not motionless, right? They're definitely moving around because they're having this big drag out fight. I think it's very much like King of the Hill style, right? Battle Royale, every man for himself. So they're not motionless, so we don't have to worry about sort of that false appearance aspect of them. But I do think that she knows about the Death Burst. And I think she definitely knows about the Mud Breath. And there's a bunch of them. So I'm going to go ahead and set us up, because I think that this is... They're pretty dumb, and they're not charismatic. So I guess, let's ask a question first. Does Leah think, based off of her research, are these creatures that can be reasoned with? And I'm going to go ahead and add a modifier to that, which is a -3 modifier, which is what we use for when we think something is unlikely. Alright, well, I rolled a 6, -3 is 3, so definitely not likely. And when we get down into that lower range, it is not likely and. So it's no and. And same thing goes at the top of the spectrum, it's yes and. So this is no, they can't be reasoned with, and if they know we're here, they will definitely attack us on sight. They are hostile to sort of natural creatures in the area. Alright, so let's go ahead and set these guys up for what I think is going to be a combat, because I think Ott is going to convince Leah that she can probably take them on her own. And Leah's like, okay, but like, just so you know, these things are gonna like blow up on you and breathe mud all over you and all that good stuff. And so Leah's gonna kind of back away, I think. So let's get Ott, Leah, and let's get some mud methods. We'll just put them in as methods. So these guys will all go the same. They all have, wow, 27 hit points. That seems like a lot. No, these are sending it. Hold on. One moment, please. Hmm. 8 seems like that's a lot of CR 1/4 creatures for an easy encounter. That doesn't seem right. Oh, that's right, because it put the difficulty at deadly, even though I said easy encounter, please. Alright, so it's definitely not that many. Oh, well, that's not going to work then. Alright, so just 1 is already a hard encounter. So I'm going to make it... Let's say that there are 2, which sets us to deadly, but I'm going to knock down their hit points because they've been fighting with each other. So I'm going to knock their hit points in half, which I think that'll make that more doable. I don't know why that is making it such a weird thing. So half 27, 14, 13. So 2 at 13. And what is there? So I usually use, for enemies, I use basically passive initiative. So they get initiative of 10 plus their dex. So the methods have initiative of 11. Obviously, Ott and Leah are going to get the drop on them. Just because they've snuck up. Well, and we should roll for that. What is these guys' passive perception? Just 10. Alright. So I think I'm gonna, since Ott's sort of leading that, I'm gonna let her make sort of the stealth roll. Because Leah's basically just following behind her. Oh yeah, no question. Not even gonna do the modifier. Definitely passed. So let's do initiative for the 2. Alright, they're both going to end up going before the mud methods. Anyways, it's actually in this order that it's already set up with. So I don't need to worry about that. Alright, so Ott sort of pulls out her bow from her sort of hiding spot and is going to... She gets multi-attack, right? Because she's a veteran. And she's going to make 2 bow attacks. We'll see the first one against one of those methods. I mean, she'll probably have to do both against the same method. And our method AC is low, but what is it specifically? 11. So 1 hits, but 1 misses. So she pegs one of them kind of cries out as they're fighting over whatever this thing is. She pops it for 9 points of damage. So she hits that first method for 9 points of damage. This one's down to 4. And she missed with the second one. Leah's going to... I don't think she would have shot at the same one. I think she would have shot at the other one because she has basically one attack, which is Firebolt, that she gets for being an elf. So she gets a +5 to that roll. So let's hope. Oh yeah, that's a 22. And she does 8 points of damage to the other one. Just sort of air sizzles as fire flies from her fingertips. Or her staff, technically, because she needs an arcane focus for the spell. So they both hit it and did sort of the same amount of damage. And our methods are going to have to go. They see where their people are. They are going to move in and attack. So one's definitely going to Ott. Let's roll to see if the other one goes to Ott. We'll just do a nice little 20 roll. I think it's very likely. So we're going to add a +5 to this roll because Ott's in front. Leah specifically moved back. Okay, so the answer is yes, but... So we have our first sort of complication roll. So we need a focus for that. So we roll a d6 that I have this handy dandy little table. This front side is actually from the GM emulator that I said earlier that I use that helps you sort of build event meanings and event subjects. And then I have some extra stuff that's sort of on the back. And so it's news of a remote event. But we already talked about, like, the methods aren't talking, so I don't think anything... actually, no, we do have a remote event that would make sense there. And so what we got for that is create tension. Okay. So something that's sort of building the tension of this situation. And it's a remote event. And I think maybe... Okay, I think I know how this works. Okay, so yes, it goes to attack Ott. But now that they are sort of up, they've actually raised elevation right to check out this shack. And they think they can see from now. Now they can turn and see, and they can see this sort of bizarre storm cloud that's over the oasis, which they can now see now that they're sort of at a higher elevation and they have a better visibility about the land. So I think they get up there and they see that and they definitely say, oh. And I think Leah, because of her background, can tell that she knows that that's... I think both of them know that that's not a natural storm, but they know that for different reasons. I think Leah knows it based off of her elemental research. And I think that Ott knows that because of her just normal outdoorsy knowledge of being a guide and kind of knowing about the weather. So seeing this sort of like stuck in place storm, they're both like, that's not right. And that's exactly where we're going. That's a problem. Okay, so yeah, that's a problem. And we actually already had that down as one of our threads, what's going on with the Stormy Oasis. But now they have the knowledge of that. So that's rising up the tensions. And I think that they can see that the storm is growing. Like, I think in the time that they'll be in the scene, they'll notice that storm is not dissipating. It's not moving. If anything, it may be growing in strength. But we have our methods. They're attacking Ott. Let's do it. Well, that's going to be a problem. That is going to be a problem, I feel like. What is their actual attack bonus? Oh yeah, they just have a +3. But that's going to be, I believe, 2 hits. It is going to be 2 hits on Ott. One of those hits is a crit. There is nothing that Ott can do about that, or Leah can do about that to sort of make that crit not hit or impose disadvantage or anything. So they are just going to take the hit. Okay, perfect. How much damage do these guys do? Alright, 1d6 plus 1. Perfect. Well, I rolled max damage on the crit, so that's great. All right. So that is a total of 15 points of damage. So these things just start demolishing. Odd. So yeah, they immediately grab them. They're like scraping and biting, and they're like grabbing her hair and punching her in the head. These ridiculous little gremlin style mud creatures, and she's getting dirty as they're just like leaking mud all over the place. So it is Ott's turn. She will obviously drop her longbow, and she is going to, I guess, use her spear. Yeah. So she'll make 2 attacks with her spear. Now I have to separate these because these guys are going to blow up if she kills them. And she knows that. So she definitely hits 1. And she's probably going to kill him. Yeah, she's probably going to kill him. She actually does not. She does 3 points of damage instead of 4. Because I rolled minimum damage. Alright. So this guy's down to 1. She's going to attack again. Yeah, absolutely hits again. There's no way that method doesn't die. So she kills one of these. She's kind of like hitting it with the butt of her spear, then turn around like stabbing it through it. Now let's see what happens when these guys die. Explodes in a burst of sticky mud. Each medium or smaller creature within 5 feet must succeed a DC 11 saving throw or be restrained. Oh, that's not good. Okay, so actually, let's do the other mud method first, because they're definitely in the blast. So let's see if they. And it doesn't say that they are immune to this. So let's see if they get stuck with mud, which seems weird, but I'm gonna roll with it, because they need all the help they can get. All right, so the mud method passes. Does Ott pass? You know, things aren't going well for Ott. She just rolled a natural 1 on that, so she is definitely restrained. So, Ott, things not looking good. She went in so confident that she was going to be able to take these things out, and they are proving more worthy adversaries than she thought. All right, so she is restrained. And next turn. But that does leave us with Leah. So Leah has a shot to take this other method out. Right, yeah, she's got her compatriot who's pretty beat up at this point. Pretty beat up and restrained by this awful, almost gelatinous mud that sort of seeped into her. Alright, so she's going to make an attack. And she's going to hit. Okay, we got a D10. There's a good chance she's going to kill it outright. No whammies. That's 3 points of damage. 3 points of damage. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, nope. Thanks, Leah. You almost did it. That leaves us with the method. So I think this method, like most creatures in that I play with, uh, they've lost one of their fellows. They're no longer fighting an even fight. The one that's next to them is restrained, so they can just book it out of here without. Because, I mean, the method's smart. It's not that dumb, right? It's slightly dumber than a human, but it's not dumb. It's smarter than most animals. So it understands its situation, and it's gonna bug out. It's gonna boogie. And I think Ott will have a chance. She will try to. She won't be able to attack it. Leah's gonna get one more pot shot at it as this thing sort of flies. I think it's gonna fly up the hillside. I think it's smart enough to know that flying higher is probably its best escape route. But Leah gets it on the second shot and just sort of leads it with her staff, and then pops it out of the sky like shooting skeet with a shotgun. And it kind of and sort of explodes into mud in the air that just kind of rains down on the ground. Maybe like 60 feet away. All right, well, that's the methods. Ott is no longer restrained. Ott is, however, not feeling great. So I think that Ott's going to take a short rest while Leah investigates the hut to see what the heck these creatures were fighting about. All right, so I think the big question is, it's got to be something valuable, right? Something that's valuable, but is it valuable to people or something that's specifically valuable to maybe the elementals for some reason? So I'm going to do a 1d20 roll. We're going to ask a question to our oracle. Is this treasure? Are they fighting over treasure? So I got a 4, so that's a no and. So it is definitely no. So it's not treasure. It's in fact something even opposite of treasure, which means that it's... Okay, I think I've got it. I think I got to tie it again. I think this is like a potter's hut or something like that. So they were just in here trying to grab clay and mud. So this is profoundly worthless to them as they see what they were fighting over. It's just like a pile of clay that's been wetted that uses for throwing on a wheel to make pots. Now, is the person whose shack this is in here? Well, because I think if they were in here, they'd definitely be dead. So let's say, is there a body? And first what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an investigation check for Leah to see if she finds a body. All right, she's not trained in investigation, so that's just a straight +3 from her intelligence. She rolled a 17 on the die, so that's 20. Yeah. So she knows specifically whether there is or is not a body in here. Sometimes I like to roll the check before I determine whether there is a thing or not a thing in there, so I don't like end up metagaming myself, being like, oh well, maybe I'll find a way to check again. But now we'll know for sure whether she'll have confidence in whether there is or is not a body in here. So we'll roll our 1d20. Yes, there is a body. So the potter is in here. So the potter's probably going to have some stuff that's sort of in their home. I think just to make this simple, to kind of keep us going, I think they live alone. I'm not going to go ahead and try to figure out whether they have relations or family or anything. So because these methods were specifically not trying to get treasure out of the house, there may be some actual items of value in here, and we don't have any obvious family that would go to, so I think they're going to take salvage rights, and they're just going to loot anything that might be valuable in here. So I do have a table that we can go through real fast to see if they have anything of worth in here. So we've got 2 characters that are active. Actually, we have 1 character that's active in the scene. We don't have two characters. We have one because one of them's resting. So let's see if what kind of treasure they might get. So it's a 1d20. That's going to tell us the type of treasure. All right, I rolled a 20, which is good. That means that there's, in fact, a magic item here. So that's amazing. So they came across this and they found the magic item. You know, maybe that's what drew the methods here. Let's find out what that is. Maybe it drew the methods here, but they didn't understand what they were looking for. Again, they're not particularly smart creatures. All right, so we've got a magic item. And I have a roll table, a 1d20 roll table based on sort of the tier of adventuring party. So obviously we're very low level adventurers. So we roll our d20 again. And I rolled a 2, which means it's a common item. Alright, so it is a permanent magic item with charges, but it's also a common item. Let's find out what that is real quick. I think, for me personally, the easiest way that I find to look these things up is going to Donjon. Which I probably should have pulled up earlier, but I didn't think about it. So we have magic items. We know that we have commons. We know it's a permanent, so we know it's not a consumable. It could be a staff. I mean, it could be a ring. There aren't any common rings, though. One could be a weapon or a wondrous item. Okay. So what kind of makes sense that might be held up in this potter's shack? I think is what we're looking for. And it has to be something that has... So we're looking for something that has charges. These are pretty sure those are consumables. I think it's going to be the Instrument of Illusions. Yeah, you know, I think it might be more helpful to have it be... What would make sense to be in here? I'm a little bit stuck. Alright, I don't know what that's going to be. And nothing's kind of jumping to mind right now, so I'm just going to leave a note and I'll figure that off later. So, and I haven't made that yet, but I usually put like a little treasure section for any treasure that needs to be turned into something or identified or stuff like that. I usually have a little treasure section in my notes. So we have a common magic item charges. Okay, so we need to figure out what that is. But that's it. That's all they find of value in there. So Ott is going to finish her short rest. I don't think that Leah's particularly interested in dealing with the dead body. I think she'll just tell somebody once they get to town about the dead body. I don't think they even have anything in which to... a means to bury that body. I don't think either of them have a shovel. So they're just going to have to tell somebody about it. once they get there. All right. Oh, that's what I'm looking for. Oh, there we go. So Ott's going to spend her one hit die. So yeah, I don't know why she doesn't have 4 hit die. She has 1 hit die. Adjust that real quick. And that's going to go to an X. All right, so she gets a D8 plus 4. All right, rolled well. So she gets 11 hit points back. So she's back to 22. Which is much better than she was. We also, so if you see down here in the bottom middle of their sheet, I have the 1d6 quiver. So basically, she fired off more than 1 shot, and I'm using this for resource management to make it a dice roll rather than tracking individual arrows and bolts and things like that. I do the same thing for rations as well. So let's see, she fired off more than once. She wasn't trying to conserve ammo. So let's see how many arrows she still has left. Alright, I rolled a 5, so she's fine. So what happens if I have this 1d6 quiver, and if I roll a 1, that means that the size of the quiver goes down to a d4. And if I roll a 1 again, that means there's only 1 arrow left in the quiver. And then once you spend that, you don't have any arrows left, and you're going to have to buy more arrows. So that's how that works. And so if she had only fired 0 or 1 arrows in an encounter, then that's what's considered conserving ammo. So she wouldn't have to roll for that because she didn't make enough shots. She'd have to make 2 or more shots. Usually that's not a problem with PCs, but right out of the gate it's going to have multi-attacks, so she's almost always going to be rolling after encounter unless she goes straight into melee. But they've done that. They have collected what they're going to collect, and they are heading down into town. So they have dealt with the shack. They have seen the swirling storm cloud over the oasis. So I think they travel for about another hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then they reach they're going to reach the trading post. And we say trading post, but we found out that Split Valley Oasis is actually relatively large. Right? It's got roughly about 1,000 people in it, which makes it a very sizable village. It's not a town, it's not quite a town, but it's definitely a sizable village. And I think the first thing they come across, they enter in there, is this gigantic sort of squarish, sort of walled off area that has this big gate in it, and it kind of looks kind of defensible. This area, it's something that both of them are going to be familiar with, but you, as a viewer, might not be familiar with. It's a thing called a caravanserai, which if you think about it as sort of a motel for traders. Basically, you, instead of having like a traditional inn and then a stables off to the side, it's basically all kind of combined together, usually around a well or something of that nature. And it's fortified, so it can kind of be out in the middle of nowhere, and you sort of buy a berth, basically a section along the outside wall in which you can keep your animals in. If you have wagons or things of that nature, you keep all your cargo in there. Like, it's really meant for caravans. It's for traders to sort of give them some sort of lodging for all their goods, for themselves and all their hangers-ons, and for all their animals, kind of all together. And it's all usually situated around a well or an oasis or something like that. So that's the first thing they sort of come across, is this Nansumber caravanserai and livery. And so Nansumber is an explorer, so it's named after an explorer. So they reach into there. So they reach into the village, and I think they're going to head to the nearest inn, which is obviously Nansumber. And so they kind of walk through these great big doors into sort of like this dusty, like hard-packed earth common that's got a bunch of people kind of going back and forth. And like even from here, there's quite a bit of noise within the caravanserai, which is sort of open right now because there are people coming in and out all the time, moving mainly between the caravanserai and the gigantic marketplace that's sort of is out in front of the trading post itself. So it's a very busy place. So it's a very happening place. There are a lot of people from a lot of different places sort of passing through this area. They're entering there. So I think that they are going to sort of figure out where they're going to stay, probably for the night. And then they're going to try to find... Leah's going to try to find her companion. So they're going to arrange rooms. So I've got a little chart. Actually, I don't need to look it up. I have a chart to sort of give some pricing. Okay, good. I rolled cheap. So the two of them are going to have to spend each a gold coin to for lodging. So Leah will pay that off when she goes down to 7 gold coins, and they have lodging for the night, and that's room and board. So they'll get a meal with that as well. I think they take the opportunity to refill up their water skins at sort of the well that's here, and Leah will ask around she'll ask the proprietor first if they know who we're looking for, and that person has a name, right? Person has a name. Omer. That's who we're looking for, the disgraced sage, which is one of her former research team members. So she kind of describes him. He's a human. He's kind of overweight. He's relatively quiet. You may have noticed him. He has this very prominent sort of tiger eye pendant, like the stone. So let's ask if the proprietor knows Omer. I think it's highly likely there's only one inn in this village, so it's only the Caravanserai. So if they're staying there, there's a high likelihood. Actually, I'm just going to make it likely. So a +3 to the roll rather than a +5. Because I'm not sure that Omer's staying at the Caravanserai, but he's definitely... somebody may know of his whereabouts, if he's even still here. So I rolled a 10, so it's 7 + 3, so a 10, which kind of puts us in the middle. So we definitely, our PCs want to know the whereabouts, so that's definitely a yes, but it definitely falls into the but category. So let's roll a d6 on our table to find out sort of what the extra information is. 5, which is an intrusive or disruptive event, so a different event happens. Okay, so what is the meaning of our event? So we need an action and a subject. All right, 39. Bestow. And 43. Bestow competition. So I think they're sitting there, they're discussing Omer, kind of the disgraced slave. And I think I know who's going to sort of barge in there and sort of this competition. Who's going to shoot up this competition. I think that they're going to get approached by Norcruth. This guy right here. The slaver. So if you've watched the first session, you know that this is one of the important NPCs that's sort of at this location, that's at Split Valley. And he has an agenda that deals with the storm. And so when Leah and Ott show up and talking about it, and Ott at least looks very capable. Leah maybe less so, but she's got that nasty scar, so maybe it looks like, our slaver kind of sees that first, sees the two of them, is like, yeah, I think maybe they can get something done. So this big dragonborn sort of like enters the scene. It's like, I heard that you're looking for that stupid sage over. Look, if you're here to deal with the storm, I will pay you. We're going to capture whatever that creature is, to bring it with us. It's really stopping my business. It's really kind of slowing down things, but we can definitely turn a profit if we capture the creature that's making this storm. And I'll sell it off and I'll give you a nice purse because of it. Now, is this something? I think this is something Ott's very open to. Is this something Leah's open to? I'm not sure. As I think that Leah understands that there's danger associated with the elementals, and especially one that's capable of like basically making a locked storm. Like, it sounds extremely dangerous. And she just watched Ott nearly get killed by two little mud things. She was like, so you want us to go against something that can make a storm? But I think Leah's also smart, so she goes, how much are you offering? Okay. So maybe there's a negotiation, right? Is the risk worth the reward? So how much is Norcross going to play? That's a very good idea. We have those magic item table, or not magic item, treasure item tables. So I'm going to use those to sort of figure out what this basic offering is going to be for him. So he's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll offer you 25 gold for this." And for a common person, for Leah, that's quite a bit of money. She's not poor. She doesn't have a poor background, so she's probably had 25 gold. She's at least seen it. She may have had it on her person at one time, but still, like, that's almost a month's worth of normal sort of wages for people. So it's quite a bit of money. But they're both, oddly, are both adventurers and former adventurers, and they're like, that is not enough money to deal with that. And so I think they kind of scoff. She kind of scoffs at Norgrowth and is like, no. Kind of chuckles and it's like, do you know where Omer is? I'm trying to find Omer. Okay, so I think between Norcross, I think Norcross's going to be kind of like flip a hand and like walk around the other way to go back to talk to whoever he was talking to before. I think he's trying to drum up people, caravan guards and things like that to sort of deal with this problem that he has. And wanting to sort of capture that monster, which he'll probably make a lot of gold on. But I think we've established now that the Norcross is a bit of a cheapskate, and I mean, as a slaver, I guess that makes sense, right? His idea about the valuations of people and what they perform is probably a little out of whack compared to people who aren't slavers. Whereas he's like 25 gold, that's good money for regular people, right? For commoners, that's good money. But Only are like, no. But they are sort of able to find from the proprietor where the sage is. So where's the sage going to be at? I think they're going to give a couple of different options. And say, oh, well, Omer, he may be at the edge of the oasis. And kind of, the proprietor is able to sort of give them some background. It's like, look, we know Omer. He is staying here. We know that he has been hired to do something with the storm, but I don't really know resolve the storm situation. But other than that, I don't really know that much about it. You can either find him at the edge of the oasis doing sort of observations. That tends to be where he is a lot of days. He's been here for a little bit, right? Or he may be across the oasis. He may be over at the plantation. Because we do know that we found out in the very beginning that the plantation owner and there's a plantation that abuts the oasis in the sort of marshy land. We know that that is sort of like the head honcho of this area. That's sort of the person that's in charge here. They're a wealthy landowner, and they basically hold court over the land around the oasis, which is an important stop on trading routes. Right, that's why there's a trading post here. That's why it's been very very successful, and that's backed by somebody who has plantation and inputs a lot of resources into that trade network. Right, so we know that our plantation owners, you know, they're making money. They're making good money. So we know that's where they're going to be. They're going to be at one of those two places. So I think they head down to the oasis. Does Ott go with them? Ott's not big on talking to anybody in general, and even here where there's a little bit more rough and tumble people in the caravanserai because of guards and things of that nature, and people, strange people from strange lands traveling through as merchants. Even here, she gets a lot of weird eyes because gnolls, right, in sort of the common D&D setting, are not really considered part of the civilized races, right? They're usually seen as monsters, as beast people. So I think that Ott's people are still really wary of Ott, and she doesn't like to spend a lot of time. She doesn't have a lot of good experiences probably in cities. So I think she's happy enough to sort of take the berth that they've paid for, and she's gonna just kind of chill out for now. So Leah's gonna be on her own to go talk to Omer. And so the first thing that she heads to the closest location, which is the shore. So this is going to be a straight 1d20 roll, and we'll see, because I think there's a 50-50 chance whether Omer's there or he's at the plantation or somewhere else maybe. Right, well, he's not down at the shore. That's a 6. So she kind of looks around, and she's not able to see anybody, and there's not a ton of people. Like, you can see that there are people who do, right, this is an underground fed oasis from that taps into the water table that comes out of sort of the highlands, the mountains that are off on the side, and they sort of feed underwater into this oasis where it sort of bubbles up to the surface. And we can see that there's like piers, and there are small boats that are used to sort of like take people across the oasis, right? Let's pull up the map real quick so you guys can see. So you can kind of see, well, you could if I maybe full screen that. There we go. So we can kind of see, right, we're here at this trading post on that northeast corner. And remember that each of these hexes represents about an hour of travel. So we came in here, and you know, she's kind of walking around. She does not see Omer on the edge of the oasis anywhere in this area in the trading post. But you do see that there are a lot of like skiffs, like small boats that are there. They're used for rowing out, and maybe I'm sure that this place is stocked with fish, most definitely. So people that use it for fishing and things like that, and for just sort of travel across the oasis, because it's right. It's a lake. It's large, right? It takes that's 1 hour, 2 hours. So 3 hours to get across to the southwest by boat. And then if you want to walk around it, that's significantly longer amount of time. But none of the boats are going anywhere because there's this gigantic storm that's in the middle. Like, it's very dangerous. So she knows, like, if she wants to go to the plantation that's way over here, she's either going to have to try to take a boat across, or she's going to have to walk around. So, all right. That's sort of the situation that she's at. Now, does she want to go back to town and see if she can find any other indication that Omer's not on this side of the oasis before she kind of schleps it across? So I think that's what she's going to do. So she's going to spend a little bit more time in town kind of looking around. which does give us the ability to basically roll a 1d12 to see if an event sort of happens, because she's basically spending time to comb through the town looking for him. So we roll a 1d12. On a 1, that means that there's some sort of encounter that happens. On a 12, it means that there's some sort of dressing that happens. And by dressing, it's going to be urban dressing, so it may be just some sort of situation she comes across. It may be good or bad. It may be something that she engages with or not, depending on what's going on. It just to add a little extra zest to kind of what's going on in town. Well, the dice are proving to be the chaos factor, because that is a 12. Which means there's definitely an encounter that happens. All right, now do have an encounter sheet in here for towns. So let me look at that real quick. Which is a 2d20 roll, if I remember correctly. Oh, no, that's the dressing I'm thinking of. Okay, so it's a d6 roll. I rolled a 2. Okay. There's a relatively large group of people. Nine of them. What are they doing? So let's use our occupation thing to kind of figure out what they're doing. Okay, interesting. So while she's looking through, she's trying to go around, trying to find, and I think she's walking the coast first, because that makes the most sense. She's kind of walking the coast as she's looking for Omer, and she's asking people around. And she comes across these 9 people who are all bathing, actually, in the oasis. But there is something that seems a little bit strange about them, or at least more than just sort of an average townsperson, and that is... Let's see what their sort of defining feature is, because I know what they are. They're rolled up as cultists, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're cultists. They could be any sort of religious people. All right, I'm going to keep rolling, because I'm rolling and I'm getting results that don't make sense. Okay, yeah, that'll work. So they have some sort of, it's either clothing or gear. So I think that they have some sort of strange raiments that they wear that seems sort of out of place. What might that be? I think they've probably got some, and maybe they're bathing, but they're not nude bathing. I think that maybe they have like these sort of like linen, almost like nightgowns that they wear, like sleeping gowns that they wear. And obviously, that's very strange. I mean, if you want to bathe, you usually do that naked. So she kind of goes down there and starts talking. He's like, "Hey, excuse me. I'm looking for a man named Omer. Have you seen him?" And I think these people sort of start talking to her. And do they know where Omer is, first off? So let's make that roll. Yeah, they do. They know exactly where Omer is. So yeah, okay. So where is Omer? Where does that make sense? Do I want him all the way over to the rice plantation? That's a pain in the butt to get to. and we're definitely not going to meet up with him this session. But that might be okay. I mean, we are kind of let's see, only got about 20 minutes left in the stream, so we could schlep across there and pick things up. But I think I'm gonna have that I'm gonna say that he's in the trading post, like proper. He's in the proper, like the actual building of the trading post, not the location of the trading post. Rather than trying to schlep across over to the land station owner place right now. So yeah, and she thanks him. Do they try to do any sort of weird culty thing on her? I think that is very likely. I think that's a +5 to that roll, because I think if you find like a normal cult in the real world, and you independently engage with them, I think that they're going to take any opportunity to sort of like an introduction / conversion thing. So let's find out. All right, so that's a 17. So they definitely try to talk to her about this, and I'm gonna give her a charisma save. I think she's a really smart person. I think she understands what these people are. So I'm going to give her advantage, but it is going to be a charisma save to try to just remove herself and not have to talk to these people any longer. Make sure that like none of the sort of roots wriggle their way into them and kind of anchor. Well, I rolled 2 18, so no chance of that. I think they kind of come up to Leah and they're like, "Hey, so, have you been introduced to our Lord and Savior?" And Leah's like, "No." And turns around, just kind of walks away. I don't care. No, and I don't care. Which I think is very much Leah's personality. No, and I don't care to know. And she kind of turns around and wanders off, trying to find the trading post. Okay. And I'm not going to do another random encounter because we already did that one. But what I am going to do is I am going to add these guys to our NPCs list. So we have down here Riverside Conservatory. We have some of the people from our backstory. We have Split Valley Oasis, where we've already met Norcruth, and we have met, or we know of him, or we haven't met him yet, at least in play. But I am going to add these guys down here because they're their own sort of little faction. So we know that there are at least 9 of them. And the thing that I think we get from this encounter is that they're living in relative peace here. Right? They haven't been run out of town or anything like that. So they're obviously not like a typical D&D cult in which they, kidnap people and sacrifice them to, raise their dreadlord or whatever. I think they're just a weird group, right? They're a weird group, and cultists, cults have a very negative connotation in the modern sense, but cults have been around for a long time. It just means that they sort of have a slightly different interpretation or different sort of religious idea, but they're not big enough, or they haven't been around long enough to be considered a full religion or sect of a religion. But that doesn't mean that they are necessarily evil. But they are certainly weird, at least weird to people outside of that, right? Because it's new and different, and they do things weird. They do things that seem strange to the average person who's in that area. All right, so she heads straight to the trading post and gets in there, and I assume that she's going to find Omer. Omer, I think, has this other person with him, and he's sort of walking through sort of like the dry goods and equipment, and it's like, I'm going to need some of this and maybe one of these. And I think that the person they're with is not particularly happy. They seem kind of grumpy about it. It definitely seems like, and I think Leah does have some charisma, but her insight's not very good. It's not good, but I think that that she, because of who she is, I think she has enough. She's had enough life experience that she understands. She can see when somebody's sort of getting frustrated, and because usually, I think, given the way that her personality is, that people tend to get kind of frustrated with Leah and the way that she acts. So I think that she can read that on this person, this elf that's with Omer, as Omer's sort of like buying supplies. I think she's going to approach and say, Omer, it's been a long time. I wanted to contact you about something, to ask you questions about some of our old research. And Omer kind of turns around and sort of like kind of taken aback, I think. And he kind of like looks her up and down. He's like, Leah? What? And he kind of reaches out towards like her face where her scar is, because he hasn't seen her since she's had this scar, and she kind of pulls back. It's like, sorry. Wow, it's been a long time. And I'm so sorry. This is, he kind of like looks over at the person, at the other person. He's like, this is Azaki, Liadon. He's my my current employer. He basically owns this town. And it's sort of a male elf. He's got a bit of a little pot belly, like, because he eats high on the hog, right? He's a very comfortable lifestyle, and he has sort of this little soul patch that he has, and he sort of gives a slight head tilt and sort of offers his hand to Leah and shakes it. Charmed, I'm sure. We were finishing up some business, which I suppose I will pay for your collection, Omer, while the two of you discuss. So he sort of steps away to the counter and sort of like begins the sort of checkout process of buying these goods for Omer. And so, I think Omer and Leah kind of step outside out of the front porch. I feel very much like it's got an Old West building kind of feel, so it definitely has sort of like that front porch walkway that kind of serves as sort of a sidewalk through the town. Or through the village, it's not actually a town. And they both sort of sit down. I think there's probably like a bench out there. Leah, what are you doing here? I mean, it's been forever. It's great to see you. I'd love to hear what you've been up to. He sort of awkwardly kind of stumbles around trying to figure out how to ask her about this very relatively fresh, gigantic scar on her face. And she kind of just ignores that question, kind of pulls her pack around and sort of pulls out a folded up letter, the letter from Harol, and sort of shares it with Omer. Take a look at this. I received this from Harol, the librarian, you remember? Back at the conservatory. He had a question about our research. I guess he was looking it over. But I went to go visit him at Riverside. Of course, they didn't allow me to enter, but they told me that Harol was dead, that he had taken his own life. I feel confused, like I don't understand why Harol would go through the process of writing me this letter and asking for my opinion or my input on it, and before I can even get there, or would have been able to answer it by letter, to find out that he's dead. Who asks the question and then immediately kills himself? I mean, he was never a happy person. I was like, yeah, that's true. And they both know that he's a bit of a misanthropic mess. Harol was. Right? He was definitely a person who worked in sort of the library area of the conservatory, specifically probably so he didn't have to have that much interaction with people. But enjoyed books and the knowledge aspect of that. He just people were a bit much for him, and so he tried to have less contact, less chit chat, those sort of things. So Homer kind of like flips over the letter. Like, I don't know. He poses an interesting question though. Were you at least able to take a look at the research, kind of verify what he was talking about? Lee kind of shakes her head. Oh, I see. Well, I'd love to help, but I'm kind of wrapped up with the, and he kind of thumbs over at the oasis and the giant sort of swirling storm cloud that's above it. I'm kind of wrapped up in, actually, since you're here, maybe. And I think at that point, Azaki kind of steps out, and he's got some people that are carrying sort of like wrapped up bundles of the things that they've bought. He's like, all right, Omer, if you would, perhaps get back to work. Yes. Actually, Azaki, this is Leah. This is actually she is an expert in elementals and primordials. I specifically called her in to assist on the assessment. You called her in to assist, and this is the first I'm hearing of it. Yes. Well, you seem like a very important and busy man, so I didn't want to trouble you with such a minor thing. And how much will this cost me, Omer? Yes. Yes, Leah. What would be the appropriate rate? I mean, are you good with the rate we discussed before? And he's like, huh? Giving her sort of the wink, like, yeah. And I think Leah sort of takes the opening, and she's like, yes. I think I have a companion with me as well that I think will be helpful for the situation. And let's just roll a basic. It's not really deception, but she is definitely trying to exude an amount of confidence and sort of like ingratiate herself in this situation that we're sort of creating. So it's somewhere, I think it really blurs the line between persuasion and deception. So I think it's just going to be a basic charisma check, because it would be the same roll either way. She's not trained in either. But it's definitely like, if it's a failure, I don't want to be like, oh, you're clearly lying. And I think I'm going to give her advantage because Omer's definitely kind of building her up, right? He's giving her the assistance on it. Okay, that's 17 plus 2, so that's a 19. And I think that's gonna hit the DC for any average check like that. That's definitely gonna kill it. So I think that she adds just basically the day rate. I think, does she go cheap? I think she goes cheap because she wants the opportunity to. She knows that she doesn't have a lot of money, but she's also more interested in getting the information out of Omer than she is in actually dealing with the elemental problem. So let's look at our sort of hirelings. So she's what I would consider an expert laborer, right? Because she has a higher education, she has expertise specifically in that issue. And I think that's normally the way that I run that is that's 4 gold coins a day. And it's not probably going to be hazardous, so there's not an increase there. And it's not, she doesn't really need to necessarily bring a lot of private kit or anything to deal with that, because she's not necessarily doing that. So I think it's just going to be, and I think she's going to bump it down to make this more, because she'd rather get some money than no money out of the situation, I think. And I think that's helps her angling. So I think it would be, her labor is 4 a day. I definitely think that Ott's is 2 a day, so that would make 6 a day. So I think she's just going to bump it down to 4, and be like, yes, but it costs 4 gold coins a day for me and my companion, and that's not here. And I think Ozaki kind of sighs. Fine. 4 gold a day is fine. But I want this solved soon, Omer. And, I'm sorry, what was your name again? She's like, Leah. Leah Amakir. Leah. I want this solved soon. At the plantation, we were almost done. We were almost finished with the irrigation fields. It is time to start sowing the spring fields. Much of our winter crops were hurt by the weather. It's essential. Understand me. It is essential that we get the spring fields planted next week. All the way planted next week. That's multiple fields. And it's sort of the middle of the 5th week. So they know that they have about one of those days that they'll have off, but they do know that that's about 6 days. They've got about 6 days to figure this out. It's like, so you have until the end of next week, and I want it done. I want this to no longer be an issue. Do you understand me? I don't care how it's taken care of. I just want it taken care of. And we're like, of course, yes, of course, we'll have this wrapped up. Certainly. Storm's not going to be a problem. You have my word on that. I think Ozaki just kind of looks up and down and goes, Well, here are your items. Report back to me when you can. I'm headed back to the plantation. Of course. Leah kind of waves goodbye. Homer kind of turns around and is like, well, yeah, all right. Well, I'm glad you're here. Let's, I've been trying to figure out this stupid elemental storm. I'm pretty sure it's elemental based, but I'm not sure. So your insight would be really great. I got some scientific equipment that we can use that I had ordered and had transported here. So I think we can drop some of those survey things out. You said you had a companion? Ah, yes. Leah goes, Ott is my companion. She's a rough and tumble type. Ah, a rough and tumble type. That could be very helpful. We definitely could. He kind of looks between himself and her and be like, we could use a little extra muscle. Indeed. All right. Well, I will get this stuff down to the water's edge. If you want to collect your companion, and we can maybe shove off in one of these small skiffs and drop off the equipment and get a closer look at the storm. I'd love to have your input. Fine. And I think that is, I think that's going to be a good place to end it. Well, before we end it, I just want to make sure Leah's going to go back to the caravanserai and talk to Ott about everything. See if because she still needs to persuade Ott to keep Ott on. Because Ott basically finished what she was contracted to do, which was to help Leah get to the area, and then Leah, of course, has to pay for her to spend at least that day's wage in lodging. So she needs to go back to the caravanserai and do that. So let's see if does anything happen on the way back? Go. No. All right. So nothing happens on their way back. So Leah sort of enters the caravanserai, kind of looks around, and kind of talks to the proprietor, finds out where their berth actually is that they've actually paid for. Kind of goes, and Ott's sort of like Ott's on a cot. Yeah. Ott is on a cot. Yep. And she's just sort of like has her armor off. She's just kind of relaxing. Just sitting in the breeze. I mean, it's starting to warm up, right? It's definitely sort of like midday, getting in the afternoon. It's starting to really kind of warm up. It's probably approaching the 80s. It's still kind of cool because it's still spring, but the sun's just kind of beating down. So it definitely feels warmer out in the sun. But in the shade, it feels probably pretty nice. And so Ott's just kind of relaxing. She may be dozing, but she's definitely awake when Leah enters. Well, Ott, thank you for accompanying me. I've actually been hired on for another project by the Omer, the man I was here to see. Uh, there's pay for you if you stick around as well. It's We're just doing some research on the anomaly. She kind of looks up at the sky that's in the middle of the oasis. Uh, if you're going to be around for a few days, there's money in it for you. Ott kind of, I think Ott kind of grabs her purse, her like corn purse, and kind of feels around there to feel how much is in there. How long's the job? Well, I think we only have a week at max, so maybe a little longer. So relatively short. And there's going to be combat. I hope not, but I can't say no definitely. But right now we're just sort of taking a look at things. What kind of nods her head? Sure. And kind of lays back down. Like she's like, oh great, we're obviously going to take it on tomorrow. And Leah's like, so we're leaving now. Not kind of like opens her eyes back up and kind of growls under her breath at her. And then like Leah's like, yes, I know, but now, during the middle of the day when we can at least see things. Not sort of agrees and starts like pulling her gear back on. So the two kind of take their gear and are going to head out of the caravanserai down back to the shore of the oasis and see if they can find Omer and his boat. And that is where we're going to leave it this time. And next time we'll pick it up as they sort of reach the edge of the oasis and take a closer look at this storm anomaly and what it means. And let's see what Leah can piece together from it. And then we'll have to find out, is that related to the letter from Harol? Is it related to the primordial dragon? Or at least will we get more information out of Omer about Harol? Well, those are the things that we're going to definitely take a look at next week. So I hope you'll join me there. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was really fun for me. I felt definitely now that I've gotten into it. I've done solo RPG play before, but it's never been on stream, sort of with an audience before. So this is still a little new, but I think I'm getting a hold on the system and how the things are going to work and how it's going to kind of flow together. And like I said, I know a lot of it's analog right now, and I'm hoping to sort of upgrade that as I go. Kind of consolidate things so that way I can do things more on screen for you guys, so you guys can get the same look that I do when I'm playing, which I think will be very helpful for you as an audience, and also if you're interested in running your own solo RPG with 5e, I think that'll be really helpful to see sort of the tools that I use and how it's actually pretty simple and you can do it all yourself. But that's it for me right now. Of course, if you're looking for more information, whether it's about solo RPGs or DM craft or any of that stuff, you can definitely find it at the website below, redraggedfiend.com. Get that information. If you enjoyed the stream, I'd really appreciate the follows. And you can also give me a follow over on Twitter, and you can get notifications, when I'm going to stream, when new blog posts go up, because I just put one up yesterday, so there's a fresh blog post for you to check out that talks about some of the things that I have in this, which is my DM's binder. I talked a little bit about some of the improvised numbers and how I use them. And I'm going to be going through more of that in future blog posts. So if you're interested in that, or the world building aspect I did, or the solo RPG, or just, how to be a good DM and how to sort of upgrade and keep learning and keep improving your DM craft, I really think it would be helpful to check it out. I spent a lot of time on it, many years on the information. I use the information, so it's not just all whiteboard stuff. It's stuff that's actually got gameplay tests behind it. So I'd really appreciate if you guys check it out. And I guess that's going to be it for me. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.